Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Leaders in Sustainability vodcast. Today I've got Rachel Gavey who's joining us. Thank you, Rachel.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. Rachel is a sustainability and innovation advisor, and she has a few businesses that operate in that space. The first of which is RGC, her consultancy, and the second of which she is a co-founder of a business called Sustainable. Rachel, just for the listeners, viewers, do you want to give us the kind of overview of who you are and what your businesses do?
Yeah, sure. So my original background is I'm earth science, ocean science educated. I went to university basically just to learn everything about the earth and the oceans. It's always been a real passion of mine, and carried that through to doing my PhD in that area, and then found myself working in the oil and gas industry while I was living over in New Zealand, which wasn't quite on the plan. But actually turned out to be an incredible experience, amazing training, amazing travel, really, really great people. So I did that for a little while. And then as a family, we decided to sell up and move to beautiful Scotland, to Edinburgh. So I found myself with two very young children and no job. And I think I could sort of see that on a personal level, and also for the industry, things needed to change, and I could see myself sort of coming away from the sort of true offshore oil and gas work that I'd been doing before as a geologist, and found myself, the type of work I was doing changing, and advising companies very much on their technology strategy for the energy transition instead. And through that, started having more discussions around sustainability, ESG practices, how companies can operate in a more responsible manner. And my main business, RGC, that really sort of covers all those bases. And then a few months ago, an ex-colleague of mine, a really inspirational woman that I had been doing some work with, Dr. Rosalie Constable, we decided to sort of formalise our working relationship, and we set up Sustainable. And that's very much focused on the sustainability issue. And we're talking with lots of different companies across different industries. But at the moment, most of our time is working with offshore oil and gas operators around the world, and trying to really make sense of what the energy transition means, and how they can operate in a more sustainable and responsible manner.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Probably the first question that I've got then, based on that very short synopsis of where you came from, I guess so. Oil and gas is it's a very hot topic just now. So I'm really interested to understand how you're transitioning. So you obviously worked in the oil and gas industry. What are you seeing? How have your kind of has your viewpoint changed? What inspires you to, I guess, continue to work with those type of companies? That'd be good. That'd be good to hear.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, my background is earth and ocean sciences, and that's what sort of drove me into studying and dedicating many years at university learning all about how the earth works. I was actually really proud to work in the offshore industry in oil and gas, because we unfortunately still rely on petroleum products for so many things that we do. And I do believe that going forward, that element of oil and gas is going to be part of our lives for a while, until we come up with the right solutions. But I think there was always a part of me that felt that I could do something different that was contributing more to sort of a better future. And I think having children really sort of cemented that for me, having little children and thinking, what's their future going to be like, and their children's future. And whilst I see that there will be an energy mix for some time to come, there's so many other things that we should be doing and exploring. So before I went into oil and gas, I worked for a little while in technology innovation, so looking at different technology solutions, bringing new technologies to market. And I sort of took those skills and combined them with my passion for earth sciences and my insights into the energy industry, and started, looking for opportunities to work with companies who were doing really pioneering things and coming up with new ideas. And I guess that's just really what drives me. I don't think I've ever been so driven in my career before, actually, as I have been in the last few years, and really trying to make a real difference and find actual solutions to things that are going to work, and make companies think a bit more about how they're working and help them to operate in a more responsible manner, I guess, is what sort of drives me to do what I do now.
Amazing. And that I don't have kids yet, but the amount of people that I've spoke to recently that have said, like, really does make you think.
It does.
And can change your viewpoint and also strengthen values and things like that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and when you're going to work every day, my children are at school and at nursery and at childcare, you want to be spending that time doing something that really drives you, that's worth getting out the house for, and being away from your family. And so for me, that's what I'm doing now.
Amazing. So we've spoke a bit previously about how change comes about within companies, and that's obviously a lot of the work that you do. So interested to hear any thoughts, ideas, or even just tips for the listeners about how you can encourage change within an organization, positive change. Keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge. It's a challenge for every company and organization, whether it's a small one or a multinational one. And I think there's a number of different areas. The desire for change has to come from those running the company. They have to make it an important part of the culture within the organization. It has to be, a worthy topic of discussion amongst everybody, and there has to be times set aside for employees to feel that they can be contributing to change within the company. But equally, as importantly, it needs to be looking for inspiration from the employees. What are people passionate about? Where are the ideas coming from your employees, and how can you get them really engaged? One of the things we do is try and identify specific areas that a company feels really passionate about, and quite often that's driven by the employees, and where the company's operating. So, if you can't have that passion and you can't have that feeling of involvement within the company, and that it is very much part of your culture, you're not going to get behind it. And we saw a huge shift in the offshore industry with health and safety. Health and safety became the number one topic, and really making sure that everyone was operating safely and reduced injury and reduced loss of life, which is incredibly important when you are working in a dangerous, potentially dangerous environment. I think now we need to see that conversation around sustainability being, up at the front as well, and sort of saying, what can we do? And it's everything from small things like, do you need to print all that document off in an office? Is that essential? Do you need to fly down to London for a meeting, or can you do it virtually, as we've been doing for the last 18 months? And then it scales right up to, we talk to companies with big operations. What are you doing to reduce your emissions? What are you doing to reduce harm? And then the flip side is, what are you doing to give back? So is that giving back to a community? Is it, passing on education, inspiring the next generation of engineers and scientists, or whoever is relevant to your industry? And what environmental studies are you doing? If for a lot of the operators that we talk to, if they're working offshore, what are they doing in that space they're operating that's actually making a benefit to the environment? Can they work with universities? Can they give them data, run science projects? So there is a massive range of things that you can do, from what seem like quite small things, but actually are really important when everyone does them, up to really large scale, activities as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. The question I've got though is just, so how do you create that environment within an organization? So you've mentioned about like it coming from the top down.
Yeah.
from the kind of leadership, shareholders, whatever that is, or coming from the bottom up, from employees, the people who are right on the kind of ground floor, seeing the impact or communicating with customers, etc. What's the middle ground? Like where do we start with that? How do we build those kind of conversations into organizations? I know that's a big question.
That is a big question, and I think it does vary between each organization. It depends on the scale of your organization. But I think for me, it's just figure out, regardless of the size of your organization, figure out what is important to you and what you think you can really get behind and actually make an impact. And not try and be too broad, maybe try and sort of focus on what really matters, what resonates with you. Like I said, is it something your employees are really passionate about, or is it something that's relevant specifically to your business? And just start talking about it, start publishing it in your internal communications, celebrating what people are doing. If somebody does something that contributes to it, celebrate it, talk about it, and also talk about what's hard too. If you have a goal, it's good to have goals in a company that are challenging. And when they are challenging, let's talk about why they're challenging and what you're doing to try and overcome that. Because I think with the whole sustainability topic, especially when we're talking about big organizations, it's about being honest and transparent, and nobody's doing everything perfectly. And everybody, to some extent, I think now is trying, and some are doing better than others, and some are finding it harder, and sharing those lessons. But yeah, just start talking about it and start making it a normal conversation.
Amazing. And we've just going back to the kind of, because we've spoke about this before again, because you've got kids, and because things need to change, and there is obviously there's an immediacy to things that I think we've not experienced before. How do businesses cope with that, or what's your thoughts on that? Just like the speed of change, the speed that things need to change, and potentially how businesses that are quite entrenched, like how are they going to change? I'm interested to hear.
I think I discuss this with lots of sort of people that I collaborate with and work with on a regular basis, and the general feeling is, even amongst us who work on this a lot and who talk about it, is incredibly overwhelming. I think there is a lot of talk at the moment. We've got COP26 coming up in Glasgow, which will be fantastic. Great to see what comes out of that. And there is this real sense of urgency, which is what's needed. It really is what's needed. But it can be incredibly overwhelming and quite stressful as well. When you start thinking about, what's my child, what's their sort of lifestyle going to be when they're 50 or 60 years old, not even that old, and their children. It is quite overwhelming, and there's a lot that needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly. And the general frustration is, it's probably not being done quick enough. And that's why we need events like COP26 and incentives by the governments to sort of really push that along. But yeah, in terms of the speed, it needs to move faster, in my opinion. It's just how we do that is the big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess so. I'm keen to try and pick out some of the lessons that come out of a lot of the incredible conversations you're having. From a consumer perspective, what, you've mentioned this before, what about being honest about what we consume? So from a consumer perspective, and maybe also from a business perspective, in your opinion, or through your learnings, what things do we need to be thinking about, both from consumer and business perspective?
I mean, it's really everything. I think one of the big topics at the moment is about obviously renewable energy and replacing electricity resources to our homes and our cars and vehicles and everything, and that is incredibly important. And I think obviously that's something that we need to do more of, and with the speed we need to do it quicker. But I sometimes feel like there can be a lack of awareness of the fact that petroleum products, which is what we're trying to phase out, are everywhere. They really are everywhere. So lots of the products that we have at home, cleaning products, makeup, your bike, your surfboard, there's so much out there that is based on petroleum products. And I think, to be fair to the consumer, sometimes there is only so much that you can do as a consumer, because it is very, very hard to completely eradicate those sorts of products. But there are some amazing companies out there who are doing fantastic things with more renewable resources in a sustainable fashion. We're seeing a big move in the fashion industry with, there's a lot of talk about designers making things on demand recently, and there are things happening, shopping smarter. What can you buy that's going to last longer? I read a great article the other week about tourism and how that's going to change in the future. Maybe people going on longer trips. So you're still flying. That's something that you still want to do. You still want to go out and explore the world, but maybe you go for a longer period of time. So you go on a trip and you're in a country, exploring it and making the most of that country and that experience for 3 weeks instead of 5 days. And through that process of being in those countries for longer, maybe you're sort of giving more back while you're visiting that country, because you're there longer, you're getting to know the people there, the culture. So there are different things changing all the time. And I think as consumers, we are really powerful. You can look at what goes into your shopping trolley, and you can look at who your electricity provider is, and you can make those decisions. But there is still a huge amount that needs to be done from higher up. So governments need to be a lot more proactive in that. They need to be doing more. The big organizations need to be doing more. There's changes they can make that do make a really big impact. And, the conversations we're having with some of our, clients and contacts, they are making changes, and there are some really incredible things going on. So I think it is a case of everyone just sort of doing what they can at the moment. But it comes back to that need for speed, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I think I came across a post this morning actually, which I really stood out to me, and it was a fashion business, just because you mentioned fashion, and who really are, I think they specialize in denim, and they've built a lot of education around how people can repair their products and make them last a lifetime and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they had called out, and I think this is a concern that a lot of people have just now around a lot of talk and no action. They had called out that one of the spokespeople at a very well-known kind of fashion celebrity at COP26 talks a good game, but actually their actual real businesses are really falling short on sustainable action. And I just thought, that makes sense. And it's a shame that I think a lot of people are worried that there's going to be a lot of talk and maybe necessarily not action coming out of COP26 at a kind of governmental level. From a business perspective, obviously a lot of the work you do is around action and making that feasible and viable. What any advice, tips, or even maybe like stumbling blocks or challenges that smaller businesses should be thinking about when it comes to taking first steps, taking action, and potentially not getting caught up in kind of this whole anxiety about it being too big a problem?
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned before, finding things that really have a meaning to your organization and your company is a good start. What really matters to you. Look at where you're working, physically where you're working or where you're supplying your products to. What's happening in those areas that you feel as a team or as a company you could really make some impact on. And I think, in terms of the talk and no action, we need to be doing things that really make an impact. That is absolutely key, because that's something that a lot of industries get criticized about, talking about things and it's like, well, what are you actually doing? I think one of the areas that people are falling short, and what I'm hoping with COP26, is that we'll start seeing more sort of rigid reporting and ways of really benchmarking how different companies are doing. So, like for example, with emissions, when we talk about emissions, there's a number of different ways that a company can publish its emissions. There's different units, there's different ways of talking about it, and it can be quite confusing to really compare how companies are doing. I know there is a call for that to become more standardized so that everyone has to report on exactly the same thing. And there's other things that are being reported where that same approach can be taken, a consistent approach. And then we can actually start seeing how these companies are doing and really honestly say, well, that company is doing really well and that one isn't, despite what it's been saying, because you can see what it's doing and it's more transparent. Because I think the way the reporting is at the moment is there's lots of different ways of doing that, and it doesn't make it easy to really see what companies are doing. So that's something that has to change, and I hope that with COP26 that's something that comes out of those discussions.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Just on the innovation front, so that's something that you mentioned right at the start. How big a part does innovation play in solving some of the challenges that we're facing, and how does that how do you build that into your kind of consultancy services? What are you seeing from businesses in relation to innovation?
Yeah, I think the term innovation is quite broad and it covers a number of things. For some of the people that I talk to, it's really about new ways of thinking, new ways of addressing problems and challenges, and coming up with new ideas. There's a huge move across many industries, but I obviously see it in the industries I work in around data becoming more accessible, digitalization of information, access to information and analysis of that. And that's something that's really important. How can we use the data we've got to get the insights into how systems are working, how systems can do better? What can we do with that data? How can we visualize the data? Coming from an earth science background, there's a lot of data that's produced and only a tiny fraction of it is actually used, because it's, how do we actually visualize what it's telling us? So there's a huge move in innovation in that. Then there's the innovation around engineering. So I do quite a bit of work looking at the technology trends for offshore wind and what offshore wind turbines are going to look like in sort of 10, 15 years' time. And every day, there's companies coming up with fantastic ideas and testing new prototypes. How can we make offshore wind more sustainable? How can we make that better for the environment? How can we make it less of a visual impact? How can we make it generate more power for the area that it's taking up? So there's innovation across all different areas. And I think the key thing is that the thing that binds it all is the way people are thinking. If you can think in an innovative manner, that's going to be key to solving the problems, because we have some really big challenges right now, and we need to sort of support those people who are coming up with the new ideas and get those ideas tested out there and see if they're going to make a difference, and do it quickly. Get things tested, and if it fails, and you move on to the next thing, but test it and see what the outcome is.
Absolutely. The other word that just came to mind there was collaboration. Like from a marketing and branding, but actually from a pure essence of branding perspective, collaboration is actually one of the most fundamental things or component parts of creating something that's impactful and beautiful. But it got me thinking about collaboration, and I'm interested to hear your views or insights in relation to the industries that you work within and how open they are to collaboration or how closed they are to collaboration. And the reason I'm asking this is there is a lot of talent and ideas and new projects that are maybe from smaller organizations that bigger organizations could benefit from. In the sectors you work in, how much do they foster collaboration, and could they be doing more with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really passionate about collaboration. I like to really encourage collaboration within my own businesses, lots of open discussion, and then obviously with our clients and outside of that. it's absolutely key. No one's going to come up with all these solutions by themselves. It's not going to happen. We have to work together. And sort of going back to, we've got COP26 coming up. One of their 4 pillars is around collaboration. It underpins everything we do. One of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is about collaboration, fostering relationships and collaborating together. And for me, it just underpins it. We have to work together, and the more we can do that, the better. I think in terms of the renewables industry and the work I do in that, and the low carbon area, there is a lot of collaboration that's going on, and there's some fantastic funds. There's some really fantastic centres that are set up. There's quite a few here in Scotland and across the UK and globally as well that's bringing those together. And I think it's just about opening that conversation and getting, helping, because the ideas quite often do come out of smaller companies, smaller organisations, and there are different funds that are set up to help that growth and put those people in touch with the right people who can help their product be tested and become a commercial product if it's successful in the testing. I think it's probably one of the most important things out there right now.
Cool, thanks for that. So I don't have any further kind of specific questions. What I did want to ask, if possible, is just for you to kind of rerun through the work that you do and the type. I'm quite interested for the audience to understand the types of businesses and organisations that you can help. And then if you could just finish off by letting people know how they could get in touch. If they want to get in touch.
Yeah, thanks. So within RGC, so that's, you can find me on LinkedIn, Rachel Gavey, RGC. It's probably the easiest way. We help companies plan their offshore wind developments. We do a lot of technology landscaping and research work, helping companies choose the right technology, going forward for what's going to solve those problems. We help people collaborate, projects that are coming up, if they need funding or if they need to talk to other people and get a group together, we can help with that. And we also work with companies around their strategy for the transition. How if you've got a business running now in a certain area, how is that going to look in 10 to 15 years with this changing environment that we're in now? And how can you make your business more sustainable? So what do you need to do? What new products can you look at? What can your strategy look like to make sure that your business will be profitable in sort of 10 to 15 years? And some of those people that we speak to in that area are very much in the energy area at the moment. So oil and gas-based companies, they know that they need to change what they're doing. They need to come up with new ideas of working. So we work with operators and service companies and sort of say, let's see how we can use the skills that you have now to sort of feed into that collaboration and find new ways of working and new products. Over at Sustainable, which is www.esgable.com, we're open to talking to a whole range of different industries. We already work across a number of different ones and have some really interesting conversations across a whole area. I think the great thing about sustainability is it's such a wide range. It affects every single industry and every single organisation, and with that side, we very much look at what your organisation is doing now, where it's operating, how we can help you become more sustainable. We align ourselves with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we help you pick the goals that are most relevant to your organisation, and then we're really passionate about finding projects that your company can get involved with that are local. So, it doesn't have to be always a big grand gesture like some of the big organisations. It could be working within your own communities to something that really does make an impact. We've looked at going into local schools, helping out with food banks, planting and environmental initiatives. So, and then we go all the way through to sustainability reporting with that as well. How are you doing and what are your plans for the following year?
Amazing. Thank you. I do have one more question.
Okay.
It's a last minute one. Earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned that over the past 2 years, you've been kind of more driven than you ever have been.
Yeah.
big question, potentially.
Oh.
You might have a straightforward answer, and you might have already answered it. But what does drive you, and how is that going to shape the things that you do over the coming decade?
Okay, that is quite a big question, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
What drives me? I think for me, it's working on projects that really challenge me mentally, that really make me think. I like a problem that I can't necessarily answer myself. I like something where I, need to pick up the phone and say, I've got this project, let's work on this together and see what solutions we can come up with. It's always more fun working with other people, and you get better ideas when there's a group of you. And the projects that I work on, I genuinely feel like they're making a difference.
Okay.
And they're making a difference to the world that we're living in, and the future for my children and their children and so on. And that's really amazing. And, you sort of mentioned earlier about talk and no action. Well, I do feel like I am doing things that are making a difference, the action side, which is really empowering, actually. So, yeah, amazing. That's what drives me.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for sharing that. I did chuck that in the last minute.
That's okay.
Cool. Well, that's the interview coming to an end. So thank you very much, Rachel, for giving up your time.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure that the listeners will find a lot of value in that conversation. So thanks for sharing, and I'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Lee. Bye.